Yeah, we bought it. It was listed at 650. We got it for 594. There was a bidding war, and then somehow everyone dropped out. There was some plumbing issues, some galvanized plumbing, so we knew that it was probably about 10 grand worth of work. We got it for 50,000 under market value, put that 10 grand in, and it probably went right up back to 650. Another thing that was super attractive to me about this was the size of the lot, 50 by 150. I love the fact that you're 3 blocks away this way from the water, and right behind you, you've got a beautiful walking path that goes all throughout Peterborough, right on the bus line, right close to downtown, right close to the schools. I mean, it was a win-win-win overall. You know, after a ton of research on just every market in southern and northern Ontario, Peterborough just seemed like a solid one. It's got a bunch of schools. It's about 80,000 people. Close to the highway. You're a couple hours from Toronto. There's just a strong rental market here. And I know that the city of Peterborough, although they aren't the best, they're far from the worst when it comes to permits and developments, etc. I also built a team of people here, inspectors, plumbers, contractors, one of the top real estate agents, and that to me is one of the most important things. Anywhere where I can build a quick power team is that's, I mean, that's the name of the game.
I think it's a really tight rental market, right? Like, I think that you're starting to see that like more and more everywhere, but you're getting tenants now. Like if a tenant's getting evicted, right now we have a market that's very owner-occupier driven. So you're getting like a lot of people from our generation maybe buying their first home and maybe they want a duplex, right? And so they're evicting a tenant within their legal right, and that tenant disappears. Now that tenant who's maybe moving from Keswick or Uxbridge or whatever is going to have to come somewhere like this to be able to afford something comparable. And so you have these external factors driving the rental market up from a price perspective, and you have a rental market that was already tight.
Yeah, I mean, there's, again, I think the proximity to the water, the proximity to a major walking trail back here, and just the depth of the lot. We're 50 by 150. You know, there's a part of me that just likes buying. Yeah, I love buying real estate, but I love buying the land as well because they're not, you know, you can't get any more of it. There's also the possibility of eventually putting a laneway home in the back here, which I'm super excited about. Knocking down the detached garage, the 2-car detached garage, and being able to really turn that into a pretty amazing space back there.
Yeah, so I mean, it is like it's on the Trent Severn Waterway, but it's also like sort of your urban center of the Kawartha Lakes, right? And it plays an important role in Ontario in that respect, where it's kind of like your rural urban setting. And there's a lot of considerations that happen there from employment. Like it used to be, I think it was primarily a battery town. It was GE or
General Electric and Pepsi.
Yeah, it was like all of the employment, and now you're seeing like a big institutionalization. You've got a lot of schools. You're starting to see small businesses, and again, just coming back to that, like you're starting to see employment from urban area.
Well, I won't get too into the numbers because I don't have my spreadsheet in front of me, but overall we're making cash flowing about $10,000 a year, $10,000 annually, which is great. Makes about almost $900 a month in cash flow. We've got a great tenant downstairs, and actually we're here today doing this whole filming bit because we're actually have no one upstairs right now. They just moved out, so we're gonna go upstairs, do a whole bunch of painting, put some new light fixtures up, and be able to raise the rent a little bit and hopefully get another great set of people in there.
Is a homeowner going to find more turnover out here or in the city? Because that's going to add to the cost of maintaining that relationship.
Yeah.
You're always trying to find new renters.
It's a good question. I mean, I think that there's an equal likelihood of, in the city, like urban areas are often very transitory places, right? Like no young person is actually moving into a condominium in downtown with the intention of renting that unit forever, right? You're more likely to see people who are maybe committing to rental for a long term in a market like this, especially where there's affordable rental options. So I think the greater the affordability, the higher the likelihood that you're going to get a long-term tenant, or that it's a long-term tenant type of market or a low turnover market.
Great question. Peterborough is a fantastic place. You get a lot of, it is a big rental market, but I find in the places with bigger rental markets, you'll have a whole broad spectrum of people that don't treat the place with any respect, and people that I find that are, have pride of rentership, and at the end of the day, the tenant's always the real asset. That's something extremely important to remember.
I think like the big thing is your land acquisition cost, right? But also the other element is that because it's actually reached provincial policy level where you can have a duplex within an existing dwelling, and then a separate dwelling or an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, in a detached structure. I think like a lot of it's just going to be simplicity, and you're starting to see people get more and more creative with density in tertiary markets or in secondary markets, and the role that secondary markets are starting to play in the urban agglomeration of Toronto or in the Ontario market as a whole as a result of COVID and the decentralization of the workplace a little bit.
We got Mitch. No, we got Mitch Cleary coming. He's a good friend, great realtor. He's an up and coming young guy in the Peterborough area. Comes from a big real estate family, but he's really making his own way. Him and I probably looked at 100 different houses before we we found this. We found this like within like the first 5, and then we looked at another 100, and we saw just about everything there is to see in Peterborough, from the worst of the worst to the most mediocre. Because that's where my price range stopped.
A lot of like the value add stuff there is adding that secondary suite in the basement, right? That's we've looked at a ton of those together. Is that the best way to invest in Peterborough now? Is that the best value add? There's so much competition for duplexes that we spoke about. Tell me about the secondary suite potential.
Yeah, so it's always shifting, because obviously at one point there was truly some great opportunity in the secondary suites, but as we spoke about earlier, international capital is descending upon the markets of Canadian real estate, and Peterborough's on the map. So a lot of those scenarios, look, when you had prices increase by over $100,000 in 3 months between January and March, what a lot of opportunities vanished like mirage in a desert. They were all of a sudden these things that a lot of people really hit the jackpot, and then a lot of those scenarios aren't quite as feasible because we're not able to project exactly that type of increase again. So we don't know. It's quite expensive to do a legal secondary suite. A lot of the real hard cost calculations I've gotten back from people are for low $60,000 if they're going to do it all, with good high quality contractors, legally permitted, which is the only way to actually get it on title. So the range is between $60,000 to $100,000. So now, when the prices inflated as quick as they did, before, when you could take a property for $450,000, put $60,000 to $100,000 into it, be all in for $550,000, you could turn around and this thing was worth the same. Now when duplexes were selling for close to $6,000, you had just taken this property and created brand new current market value rents, newly minted property that you've got for $50,000 less than what you could have bought a duplex for. There was definitely some value there. But now when you're buying them at $650 and then putting $100,000 in, you're already in at like $750. And in neighborhoods where the surrounding values aren't quite the same, and a lot of times people are getting a little uneasy because you're exceeding the neighborhood values by putting in that $100,000.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more risk, I think, right now. It's a lot harder to see the absolute upside on those secondary suites. And for me, one thing because it's always shifting. For one time, there's a lot of opportunity. I think so many people jumped on it. Prices inflated. Unless the rents continue to rise at a rapid rate, I don't see the same amount of opportunity there as I did. Maybe I'm just not looking at it properly. It could be a misperception. But I think that a lot of stock that was on a rent per room basis shifted off because Peterborough does have a lot of students. We have a fairly sizable university in Trent University. We have Stanford Fleming College. We have a fairly sizable college. And we have Seneca College. So we have a flight college. So we have a large student base and a large international student base. So people who look for housing accommodations. And that was really the bread and butter for a lot of landlords around here, was student rental market. Now, when COVID hit and a lot of stuff was online, we saw a massive outflow of temporary students. So I think a lot of people that had 6-bed rental properties, they had to switch their strategy. And the whole time in between, a lot less people were looking to buy, acquire, or create new rent by the room scenarios. So from my own current perceptions, I think there's less opportunity in the secondary suiting, and I think there's more opportunity for people who are interested in getting back into rent by the room scenarios, student rentals, 6-bed plus type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So who's living in Peterborough these days, and who do you see moving here in the future?
So our base is changing rather rapidly. There's a lot of changeover from what would have been the norm when I grew up here, and we've conventionally been a bit more of a retiree heavy town versus the rest of Ontario's population. Because we're close to the lakes, we've got a lot of golf courses, we've got a regional hospital, so we do have a bit of an older population, and we have good government employment sectors, a lot of education here. So you have teachers, we have a good hospitality industry because of the lakes. Now, what we're getting is that less and less people are living and working in Peterborough. We're getting a lot more people that have been born and raised in Peterborough, having to work, going towards Clarington, Durham, jobs at OPG, factory jobs, electrical unions out of town, because the local wages aren't so much supporting the cost of living in the city anymore. And we're also seeing a pretty rapid shift ever since the dawn of COVID, that there's all kinds of, there's boomers that are sort of taking a preempted retirement, or just that they were always on that trajectory from the GTA and they were going to get out of the city at some point, and it sort of forced their move ahead. So we're getting a lot of GTA boomers coming here now to retire in the city and in the surrounding area. And then we're also getting a lot of millennials and basically sort of young knowledge work professionals that have mobile work that are still holding down relatively strong like marketing jobs, accounting jobs in Toronto, and they're moving here and they have pretty good budgets. So there's a pretty good shift going on in the base of who's here.
What beyond, like, I guess that kind of explains what I'm about to ask, but where's the big opportunity? Like, if there's something that people are missing in Peterborough or that the market hasn't caught on to yet,
We're not releasing that in this video.
What's
He's
the
gonna
best
tell
opportunity?
us.
What's the opportunity? You know, what's the unfair advantage?
Stay
found in
tuned.
this town?
Yeah.
Whew.
And
Like
how
and
big
subscribe.
of a check do I have to write you for the answer?
That is a multi-million dollar question. Yeah. Up for debate.
Right.
Up for debate.
Good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what I would say? What I would say is that it's probably what it has always been and will always be, is creativity in the way of developing relationships with local councils, understanding what projects they look favorably upon going forward based on their general plan, and the mandates being hammered down on them provincially and federally. And it's more of a cooperation and a communication thing with the local city, and say, is there any opportunities that you see? Because just because we think that, there might be an infill project right here, the odds are that if the municipality looked favorably upon that, somebody would have done it a long time ago. But if you have these sort of complicated, hairy, tangled up pieces of property that are going to take a lot of work to change zonings or planned uses on, and it's just a lot of work on the logistical side of things, not so much on the physical bricks and mortar side, and the city looks favorably upon it, and there's changes in use happening in certain areas based off of potentially new zoning changes because of our current government's mandates for density. I think that the shifts will have to come, they'll be in line with government mandates. So I think it'll be based on relationships and understanding what the city's trying to accomplish and working with them to see where they want to do unique things that not everyone's going to be willing to tackle.
So what do you want to see them accomplish with density? Is it walkability? Is it student centers?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to density, so an interesting bit recently, so California has been in a massive housing crisis for years. That's one thing I always find humor in, is that we do not have the monopoly on how to deal with the housing crisis here. This has been going on for years in so many other municipalities, countries, cities, and they recently just passed a major bill in California where all single-family residences are going to be able to be zoned for 4 units. So imagine the implications of that. And that's what it came to. Their housing crisis got so bad that they're basically swath zoning that anyone can turn their single-family home into a fourplex. That is groundbreaking.
And what about building up?
So building up, that's obviously you need, when you need to densify, you
Yeah.
have to go where the existing infrastructure is. And
Walkability.
I think that we have such a great walkable town, and the
Yeah.
big hurdles here are going to be, you know what the biggest hurdle is and the biggest opportunity? It's NIMBYism has been the killer in every society, in terms of like the same people people who at the federal level vote pro-density. When it comes down to a development being passed in their own neighborhood, they naysay it because it's negative for their property value. So there's always this like the negative incentive to have things done right in your own backyard. And so I think that people need to be pro-density, and we need to get over this threshold or fear of anything in this city in the downtown core and in the major areas like exceeding 6 units. Now, so we do have some beautiful projects coming online to that. No, they have East City condos, they have the YMCA developments, and it's starting. So I think as a city, as we're starting to embrace higher rise, more beyond mid rise, that's of course the future. It makes the best use of the infrastructure, densify around the core.
Right.
We have a fundamental parking issue that can be argued for sure in the core.
Yeah.
So some of these like peripheral, like not zone 1, like zone 2 areas are probably prime for more like, you know, stuff that's in the mid rise. But I think people got to welcome it. Yeah. Otherwise, it gets shut down. Like at the municipal level, the people come out with the pitchforks, and as much as the councillors want to do something, I think when they can only take so much like flack that people got to embrace it.
Thanks for joining us for the video today. If you have any questions or any topics that you want to see covered in future videos, leave it in the comments below, and we'll see what we can do about that.